Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. In this live video, we are going to be reviewing and discussing two Spike Lee films, or Spike Lee joints, I should say. Do the Right Thing from 1989 and Summer of Sam from 1999. And this is a video podcast which explores the many different ways in which stories are told. And my guest today is David, or is it Dave or David? What do you prefer, Dave?
6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's all good by me.
Dave Voigt, who has a really great podcast called In the Seats With, and he's also a writer and film critic. Dave, thanks so much again for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, anytime. So I wanted to jump right into Do the Right Thing. We both kind of mutually picked going with Spike Lee and reviewing two of his films. So what do you think Spike Lee was really saying with this film? I mean, what do you think the essence of the story is?
Oh, well, I mean, there's where do we start?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think when it really boils it down to it, I think one of the main things that was coming through, especially having watched it now again, I think it was like about the fourth or fifth time, just in preparation for this, that I had seen the film, I really noticed sort of the concept of the microaggression and sort of the microaggressions when it comes through with sort of racist behavior. And I think for me, I think that's what he was trying to put forward, that in many ways, like, we're all guilty of it. And it's one of those things that is really sort of pervasive throughout cultures, be it black versus white or white versus black or black versus Korean or black versus Italian, no matter what. It's like they're there. And it's something that we need to be more culturally aware of, because it also speaks to something else that is inherent in human nature, that it's far too easy for us to sort of want to escalate the confrontation as opposed to de-escalate the confrontation. I mean, I think that puts through really well how we sort of, the effort to de-escalate isn't nearly as attractive as sort of the energy to escalate and sort of turn that into something horrible.
Yeah, no, well said. And, we see so many themes in this film too. And of course, as you said, racism and, all in this neighborhood, or they're all segregated in little pockets based on their background. You've got the Italians, you've got the Puerto Ricans, you've got the black neighborhood. I mean, it's mostly a black neighborhood, but then of course you got the one Italian pizzeria, of course, played brilliantly by Danny Aiello and John Turturro. Is just it's just something else. But I love this analogy of love and hate. Of course, brilliant, but from Radio Raheem, is that which is from Night of the Hunter. I'm sure hate on one hand and love on the other, and that when you keep swinging with hate, that's all you're gonna get. You're just gonna get hate and hate and hate on hate. And what I never pointed out is right at the end when Spike Lee throws the garbage can through the window, he says hate right before he throws it. So all these people, for me, I've seen it many times, and just watching it again the other night, it just stood out to me how awful people are treating each other. Even like the ageism, like the way poor like Ozzie Davis is treated by some of the younger guys in the neighborhood. They just write him totally off and criticize him where they really don't know anything about his past or his troubles. But yeah, I mean, it's such an ugly film in a lot of ways, but at the same time, this humor, this blend of humor that Spike Lee finds, like, even though some of those scenes on paper probably don't seem so funny, but it's just the ways in which the characters interact and that the ways in which the actors were just delivering it, like Giancarlo Esposito, for as Buggin, like, was just, he's hilarious, but he has a point about having photos of black people in the pizzeria because they're the only ones who eat there. Did you find the humor stood out and had a real good mix of the two between the drama and humor of it all?
No, absolutely. Because I mean, it's one of those things where it needs to be a little funny. It needs to be a little uncomfortable in order to sort of make the point that it wants to make. There needs to be sort of hilarity, but still conflict between the guy sitting on the corner in the Korean grocer, or the Italian pizzeria, or like that conflict. That the humor and the conflict need to go side by side. If it's Ozzie Davis and Ruby D sort of interacting, and then just the kids on the streets, and just Spike sort of mingling and running sort of between it all as sort of our narrator and our real sort of linchpin as he sort of weaves in and out of the neighborhood.
Yeah. No, well said. What are some of the characters that stood out to you the most?
Well, I mean, I would say I really loved Ruby D, just as mother sister, because I mean she's the best, and I mean just the nature of her character being sort of this neighborhood queen on high, who even by the end of the movie gets roped into the sort of hatred of it all, and then just sort of can acknowledge it after the fact. And it's really one of those things, like it really to me felt important to sort of have that sort of mother of the neighborhood also lose it sort of at that moment as well. But I mean, Radio Raheem is great. I mean, Sam Jackson was great.
The DJ.
Yeah. I mean, even from the opening of the film with the credits and Rosie Perez doing the dance number, I mean, there is this sort of vibrancy that for even some of the characters who may not be on screen all that long, they're all important, and they all have a real sort of significance to why they're there. And I mean, I think that's one of the big things that you really have to pull away from a movie like this, because as much as you're trying to find who the lead is or who the star is, like they're all important, and they're like, this is truly an ensemble piece, which is what makes the film even that much more impressive.
That's a good point, because I mean, everyone is so distinctive. There isn't anyone with a one-liner just to keep some kind of bits of business or action going. Like they all come in with everyone gets a real focus when they're on the screen. And also like even like Frank Vincent with the car, when they with the fire hydrant and they put the water in his car, like he really takes focus in that scene. I mean, he's the only scene he's in, but it's like there can be a movie with all of those characters, because everyone is so distinctive, and there's so much to think about, because he doesn't necessarily give you the psychology behind why some of these people are doing what they're doing. You really have to kind of fill in the blanks. I mean, for example, Buki, who Spike Lee plays, you see him. He's not the best pizza delivery guy. He's not the best. He's not the best father, and he seems only interested in making money and even getting money. But at the same time, he's very good at cutting right through the bullshit. In terms of telling Pino that why Pino's a racist. That perhaps he actually wants to be black because everyone he admires was black. All the black celebrities and singers and basketball players. Even when he tells Danny Aiello, don't flirt with my sister. Everything he tells the other brother Vito, don't stand up to Pino. Don't take Pino's crap. He has this way of just being so direct, even though he seems like someone who doesn't care about much, but clearly he does. But he doesn't really, because there's so many characters, and this in a good way, he doesn't really go into really exploring their psychology. He just brings you into the truth. It's all takes place in one day, as you know. But with every viewing, I don't know if you experience this, with every viewing, I see so much more because of all the characters, of all the things that happen in this one day. Is that your experience with each viewing?
Oh, definitely. This is definitely one of those films where that happens. And I mean, I think especially on this film, especially on this viewing in particular, I think there's two things that really stood out for me. One, I think it was the cinematography from Dickerson. Just the film is one day and it's one block, but it felt big. It felt cinematic. It never felt like a small sort of specific story. It felt like a very big very ranging, very sort of humanistic story. Like, it's not meant to be about, just the story about these people on this block. It's meant to be a story about everybody everywhere. And I think it comes through really well visually.
Yeah.
And I think the other aspect of it is the costume design. Just because everyone was distinct, everyone had their own look, everyone stood out.
Yeah.
And that was so important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was watching. Did you ever see the 1 hour? I literally just saw it yesterday. It's a 1 hour making of documentary, and which is so good. Like, I really got lost in it. I thought it was a remarkable making of documentary. But someone had said that it happens to take place in New York, but this could be anywhere in America, because really, in a way, it's a story of America. You have all that. Yeah, you have all that segregation. And you have so many things that happen with culture clashing, and really that being rooted in fear of someone who's different, hating them because they're different. And then, of course, even seeing a police officer at the end kill Radio Raheem. I mean, even Spike Lee, I don't know if you saw the interview he did at TIFF a couple of years ago, 30th anniversary. He's like, nothing's changed. And it's true. I mean, people still... we still see these murders happening, and we still see people being very afraid of something that they don't know. And you see that with everyone, in this movie. You see, and I think, like Giancarlo Esposito, when I used to watch this when I was younger, I think I saw this when I was about 19. I didn't understand. I just saw that he was, to me, I just thought, wow, this guy's he's funny and he's got nothing better to do than to, try to boycott Sal's. But then really there's so much to that, because he has a good point. There's a black area and you have only Italian-American pictures up on the wall. So let's get some representation in here, because every day he's got to be reminded again and again that he's not seen even in his own environment, but then, Sal's got a point too. It's my place. I'll do what I want, but there's so much history to that. There's so much accuracy to wanting that. I mean, he's almost like a political figure. I think Giancarlo Esposito said that, nothing is just bits of business or some just to be funny. I mean, you can understand his rage. Same with Radio Raheem, with the radio. I mean, all these points of views have their, but then it's like you said, like it escalates, and the hate, and it explodes.
And it really does come through, because I mean, especially at the end of the film with the dueling quotes, one from Martin Luther King, the other one from Malcolm X, just in terms of violence and sort of the escalation therein, and how nobody wins. And I mean, that's basically the point of the film.
Exactly.
With violence, nobody wins.
Exactly.
There is no winner loser when violence happens.
Yeah.
Which is the message that gets so lost even to this day, which is the sad part of so many of these stories.
Yeah. Because even Spike Lee was saying, people ask me all the time, he said mainly people who are white would ask him, why does Mookie throw the garbage can through the window? And he goes, no one black asked me that. Everybody knew, but for some reason people I think even the criticism at the time, a lot of people didn't get it, or they thought he was trying to provoke people. Or did you read much about how people at the time were just sort of
I did. I mean, a lot of the old guard critics were interpreting it as sort of race baiting and trying to sort of stir the pot. But really, in many ways, I mean, as much as it is, it's stirring the pot in a different way, because it's not trying to rile up. It's trying to go, why are we? It's asking the question, why are we getting riled up?
Exactly. Yeah, over nothing. I mean, it's all over tedious things that become larger, and then those larger things explode. But
when you boil it down, Radio Raheem got killed because they wanted to put a picture on the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Out of a picture.
Yeah, or play the jukebox in the bar, But I also really like when he goes into the different points of views of Mookie, Pino, the Korean grocery store owner, and they all say terrible things about everyone else based on race. I mean, I thought that was just a way to make it so much more clearer as to these people are reacting off of an image or off of a stereotype or off of some perceived notion, and they're not really looking at who these people are. They're just seeing something and reacting like in an animalistic fashion. But do you think anyone in the story wasn't that way?
I forget the character's name, but I mean, it was at the end of the film, and I mean, they had burned Sal to the ground, and then they went to go after the Korean grocer, and he's out there with his broom going, "I'm black. No, I'm black too." And obviously the first reaction is like, "No, you're not black." But when it sunk in, when that moment sat with some of the other characters, it's like, "No, he's right." And then they let him go. And that's when the violence sort of, it was that moment where the rage could have continued, but it didn't.
That's a good point. Yeah, because he does say we're the same,
Yeah.
And yeah, they walk away. I was also thinking of Vito, the younger brother, because he's actually not racist at all. He likes everybody. He doesn't see anything in terms of color. He sees the people, and it's funny that I think that was not funny, but I think that was why him and Pino, his brother, had so much friction. Because Pino, played by John Turturro, was the total opposite. He's a totally angry, hates his job, hates his place in life, hates the environment he lives in, is a total bigot. And I think that's obviously why they were clashing so much, in terms of, well, you should see things from my side, as Pino, very aggressively tried to do with his brother. But there's also, even Sal is sort of, he's a pretty complex guy because he's also very nice to everyone, but he quickly he has a temper very quickly. He's nice to the kids, and then as soon as Giancarlo Esposito has a problem, he just tells him right off. Same with Radio Raheem. Same with a lot of the characters. I mean, but then he'll say something so kind, the next minute.
I definitely think he's the sort of the more tragic character out of all this, because his character obviously has such affection for the neighborhood and the people in it, but it's his space, it's his way. He doesn't want things to change in his little world that he built with his own two hands, tile by tile.
Yeah.
And that's the tragic part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Well said. What is it about this film that you really like? Is there something in it that you have seen in your life, or what is it about this movie?
I think it was one of the first films that I can remember seeing that gave me something very cinematic, but on a very small stage.
Right.
Like, it was still very big, and it was still dealing with very sort of human and real issues that are out there in society, but it was entertaining. It was visually engaging. It gave us something it gave us a world we could get invested in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like I said, it's such a fine balance of his use of entertainment, his use of being serious, right down to the music. I mean, he's got the Public Enemy theme song,
of course,
off the top. I mean, you want to get up and dance, right? Like, it's just it doesn't feel like it feels like it's going to be light off the top. And almost that segment almost feels like a music video. Like, I know he said that was he took that, was inspired by the Bye Bye Birdie intro with Elvis, which I'm sure you read. But it's I wonder where. I mean, I think he was inspired by Billy Wilder. You could see Scorsese, Elia Kazan. I don't think he really gets enough credit for that. You don't hear people talking really in terms of his crafting being so phenomenal. At least I haven't. Oh, someone's calling me. Sorry, because I'm doing this phone. And you met him, right? What I saw your photo with him.
Yes, I got to interview him one time. It was
it was an interview.
Yeah, I got to interview him one time for Chirac. He was in town doing doing press for that. It was interesting. It was an interesting roundtable because I was there with a few other people, and that like there were people of multiple colors. There were 2 white journalists and there were 4 black journalists, and they were talking about sort of the cultural issues and sort of the societal issues around the film that he brings up. And the 2 white guys were actually talking about the film. And I remember there was some point in the round table where he went, it's like, okay, who's actually seen the film? And it was the 2 white journalists who put their hands up.
Really?
Yeah. And that was, to me, that was the surprising thing, because while on one end, Spike really is this important and sort of cultural, sort of significant artists in the Black community for telling these stories, I find it interesting that he almost gets lost a little bit in terms of, I'm trying to find the right word here, I guess maybe culturally, because the films are so universal in so many ways, be it something like this or be it something like Malcolm. Like, there's so much that can be pulled from so many of his films.
Yeah. No, it's true. They're extremely relevant.
He is a relevant filmmaker, which I think is the important part.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That always stands out to me more and more. What made him realize that some people hadn't seen it? Was it what they were asking?
Yeah, it was just talking around it a little bit, and at some point he just said, "Hey, who's seen the movie?" And it was like there, and there we go.
Okay. How did he react to that?
Well, he laughed. Just laughing at the 2 white guys at the table, the ones who saw the movie. So.
Was there anything he said to you that stood out, or was it purely answering questions about the movie?
You know what? I think for me, it's just his understanding of craft, because I mean, there's something that really gets lost along the way. The man is a student of film. I mean, the man is a professor of film in New York. And there are so many filmmakers and storytellers out there who have no sense of what came before them, and I mean, I think that's kind of tragic. It's so important. The way to learn how to make movies is to watch movies.
Absolutely,
plain and simple.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you said that, and that was largely why I started this video podcast, because I couldn't. I always find many people don't know much before 1970, or even nowadays before maybe even 1980. So I you want to build on the language, and you totally see that with him. I mean, there's so many in Do the Right Thing. You can see so many influences, but not in the sense that he's ripping anyone off, in the sense that it's now become his stamp. As we said, I mean, I could certainly see a Scorsese influence. I could certainly see a Billy Wilder influence, and so on and so forth. But he even has some really, unique angles. And sometimes I thought, is that a POV? Like when they're through the window, like sometimes the camera was just tilted or it was low. I mean, obviously it was the intent was to bring out something emotionally about those people. There are a couple of times where I couldn't quite figure out why he kind of had those awkward shots. Did that pop out to you at all?
Yes, because to me, some of that was Dassin, like Naked City. And
yes.
Still sort of pulling from that New York reference, but giving it sort of that different flair.
Right. Yeah, no, that is a really, really good point, because it does have a somewhat docu-style feeling, just a touch. I mean, it's quite cinematic, but yeah, some of those kind of awkward shots that just kind of make you feel uneasy. That's how I felt. I mean, maybe perhaps that was the point.
Well, I think it was.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. But just going over, I know we talked about some of the actors, but just a phenomenal cast. Danny Aiello, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, Richard Edson, Giancarlo Esposito, Spike Lee, of course, Bill Nunn, who's Radio Raheem, Rosie Perez, John Turturro. I mean, wow. I mean, it's just I think he always said he always made such a it was so important to find the best people for the job. And in a lot of I haven't seen every single one of his films. I've seen most of them. I always can't imagine anyone else. You know, Samuel L. Jackson's another one as the radio host. I mean, his how do you feel about his casting often? Do you think he gets it usually quite right, quite nails it?
Absolutely. And I mean, he obviously has his repertory of players, because I mean, something like Do the Right Thing, it's like, oh, there's John Savage for a scene. And then
that's
all of a
right.
sudden, oh, there's a really young Martin Lawrence. You know, it's like he knows who he likes to work with.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously from Do the Right Thing and his other movies, and we can even see, even when we talk about Summer of Sam, there's crossover with some players there, which I think is
yes, there is.
Part of his style for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wanted to touch on that 1 hour documentary, which I really loved, and I love how some people in the area didn't like that it was happening because they couldn't go outside, or they were being stopped, or they had to be quiet. And then other people were like, "Man, this is a black filmmaker about a black area. This is incredible. You rarely see this." Other people were getting work on it. And then they also, they followed that one woman who was had a crack addiction, and that other woman was helping her and giving her a job and stuff like that. But I just thought that was so, I don't know what it was about it. It was just, it felt so special. You could feel everyone was so creatively involved. On top of it, yes, there was conflicts and so on and so forth. But just even at the end, I almost felt sad, like when they're tearing everything down after the 8 weeks. Like, it just felt like it meant. It just felt like it meant so much that they were filming a movie about those people on that block who were, obviously ignored in film up until that point, especially. How do you like that little 1 hour documentary?
I thought it was fantastic, and I mean, I think inside it really is sort of an important thing to remember of how much he has engendered a film community sort of in black neighborhoods and Puerto Rican neighborhoods, and really sort of engendered sort of the creative spirit that has come out of New York. Because I mean, and really when you think about it, even if you go back to like the 70s and think about Southern African American filmmakers, I mean, there was, Melvin Van Peebles, there was Gordon Parks, there wasn't a lot of people, but Spike was probably one of the first mainstream guys to hit on a global level, which really sort of created this level of inspiration for such a wide variety of artists of no matter what color. And I mean, I think this film really was a real groundswell, not just in terms of the statement that it made, but sort of the creative statement that it made and what was capable.
Yeah, very well said. No, I like that you said that, because it is, you're right, it is so universal, and it's not there's really something for everyone. I liked even what Giancarlo Esposito said, because he said growing up in that documentary, because he's half black, half Italian, and the black people didn't want to hang out with him because his name was Giancarlo. He was Italian, and the Italians didn't want to hang out with him because he was black. So he was hanging out with the Jewish people because they were the next outsider.
Right.
And that's really what the film is about. If you think about it, I'm not going to hang out with you because of you look like this, or that's your name, or, and I just thought, man, that is, and that still very much exists today. And it really, not even just America. I mean, here, even in Toronto, which is, very diverse city, we have those same sort of, segregated pockets, Little Italy, Little Koreatown, and so on and so forth. So here we are 30 years later, right? And it still holds up.
And you know what? I mean, it's a little weird, even just with us talking about this film today, and even watching the film and watching Radio Raheem get killed, and then seeing today, oh, it's been a year anniversary since George Floyd died, and I'm like, oh God, it really hammers home just how important a piece of art this film really is
Yeah.
for so many different audiences, be they black audiences, be they white audiences. It's something that needs to be reminded of. You know, it's one of those things that you need to put on every 5 years just to go, oh, right.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, well said. Well said. Was there any other thoughts on this film you wanted to mention?
I mean, I think just going back to something like Ernest Dickerson with the cinematography, I mean, who became such a fantastic filmmaker in his own right. And just, I think just seeing sort of the breadth of talent that sort of came out of the 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks sort of community that we're seeing more and more of today, this is kind of where it started.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, this is kind of where it started. And I mean, it's an important piece of history, and it's an important film.
Yeah, no, well said. Absolutely. Which leads us to our next film. But before I jump into that, anyone watching, feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comment box, and we'll read them out when a good time comes up. So we have Summer of Sam, which was from 1999. This was co-written by Spike Lee and directed by Spike Lee, as well as Michael Imperioli, who was, of course, Christopher on The Sopranos, and he collaborated with Spike Lee as an actor in quite a few Clockers, and he's also in Malcolm X. He's also in Summer of Sam. This has another phenomenal cast. You got John Leguizamo, Adrien Brody, Mira Sorvino, Jennifer Esposito, Michael Rispoli, Mike Starr, Ben Gazzara, Anthony LaPaglia. I mean, it's just another real phenomenal ensemble piece. So, looking at this film, what do you think is what do you think where does the heart of it lie from your point of view?
Well, I mean, it's a weird one because I mean, I definitely view this as more of like a quote unquote movie as opposed to like sort of a film or a piece of cinema, like a piece of art. But it still has a real relevance to it because I mean, it captures such an interesting time sort of culturally. It was the death of disco. It was the birth of punk. It was just sort of this real sweaty, uncertain time where nobody really quite understood where they stood. And I mean, from a character standpoint, I mean, I think the heart of it probably goes with sort of the Adrien Brody character and the Jennifer Esposito character, who are trying to sort of break out of what's expected of them, which I think really captures the time that Spike was trying to capture, especially, you know, in New York at the time as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you see that they are going in a very, very, very different direction in terms of, as you said, you know, he's now a punk rocker. He spent some time in England. He's got, you know, mohawk and the chains, and he's also I heard Spike Lee say something interesting, which is true. It was also a time of real excess, you know. I mean, and even though he's different, he's doing some excessive shit, you know. He's prostituting himself. He's working as a male stripper. He's doing porn. He's doing punk rock. I mean, he's pretty out there. But at the same time, his area, his neighborhood, he's from an Italian American in their period in the Bronx, and they are excluding him purely. They don't know about all that other stuff till later, purely because of the way he's now appearing, the way he looks. And I thought that backdrop of Summer of, you know, Son of Sam, these murders taking place in this, you know, the hottest summer on record night, and plus the blackouts and stuff. It was, I think I heard Spike Lee say this, it's almost like a witch or like a dark cloud just feeding on that fear. Again, it's almost like Do the Right Thing in the sense that they also don't like anyone who's different, you know? And so if these murders are going around, it's got to be him, you know, again, based purely on appearance. I mean, he's certainly doing, they find out that, you know, he's doing things that are excessive, but why does that make him a murderer? You know, did that pop out to you in terms of fear on fear again, like into the right thing?
And it's the blindness to sort of the excess on their side, because I mean, even when you look at it sort of from a historical and sort of, you know, standpoint. You know, in the early 70s, it's people smoking weed. In the late 70s, it's Quaaludes and cocaine. It's the sexual revolution, and it's different. The energy is angrier. And I mean, I think like one of the things that really stood out for me is just sort of that image of the end of the pier with the dead end sign, and just that's where they all are, and that's where they all congregate. It really gave this sense of, I mean, I don't want to say hopelessness because that's kind of the wrong word, but it was people, it was these characters who were stuck in their own universes and not capable of growing outside of it. And I mean, and especially New York as a city was at such a time where it was changing a lot. It was on the brink of becoming something else, and then it would be, you know, we were on the brink of the crack era, and then which would last like a decade, and then the city would get cleaned up after that. But I mean, it was really sort of this kickoff into a very kind of dark period for the city, if that makes any kind of sense, because it really sort of forebodes how angry the energy was, and how even if you were someone like Adrien, or, you know, who was trying to get out of it but still doing these extreme things, it was this energy of that it was all self-defeating, that it was all going to just collapse back on itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And why do you think that John Leguizamo was someone who didn't want to push him aside? They seem to have a connection. Why do you think he wasn't like, yeah, you're different, get away from me?
Because I mean, as the film showed through his infidelities on his wife and just sort of the other things that he was doing, he was definitely the weaker character.
Right.
He wanted to sort of speak up and push out, and sort of, he didn't necessarily want to go along with everyone else, but eventually he had to, because he was sort of into that kind of mentality.
Oh yeah. And that scene, well, you know, that scene towards the end where Brody gets beat up is it's brutal, and you feel so awful for him. And even his, you know, as soon as Mike Starr comes out with the gun to save him, I'm just like, thank God, because they were gonna kill this guy, you know, over nothing, and you know, obviously,
and lack of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, this relationship with Leguizamo that he had. I also saw the fact that perhaps they were so bonded because Leguizamo's also living very excessively. You know, I mean, he has that old Madonna whore complex. You know, he's obviously could only get sexually aroused in certain ways that, oh, I can't do that with my wife. You know, I can only do that with someone who's not my wife. So he's conflicted, but he's so self-destructive. You see that he ruins his job, he ruins his relationship, he ruins his friendship. It just and in a sense, they're all doing that, you know, because of this element, of course, just like we saw in Do the Right Thing, of being afraid, you know, again, as you said, being a product of their environment and not really being anyone who's an individual. And Adrien Brody even says that to him on the beach. I mean, he's smarter, and he's happy to strike out on his own. He's happy to be who he wants to be. And, you know, obviously that was not going to fly around that area. And they even say to him, you're not welcome around here. And what's interesting is that the other character who was buying drugs off of one of those guys, they you know, because he was a gay character, but they included him because he was doing something for them, which was buying the drugs, you know. So unless there's a profit to be had, then, you know, that's a fair game. But there, you know, I think I've seen this a few times, and again, it's like Do the Right Thing in the sense of that ensemble piece. There's so many characters that with each viewing, you learn more and more. Is this something? I mean, it's interesting. Earlier on, you said this is more of a movie as opposed to a piece of cinema, and I think that's true. It is more so, but at the same time, there certainly is so much to see. Have you found that? See how many times have you seen this? Do you think?
Oh, I would say 3 or 4, but yeah, no,
Okay.
it's definitely got layers. And I mean, I think there's one scene in particular that stood out for me. It was at some point, it's sort of they were in the restaurant, and Anthony LaPaglia's police officer character was obviously talking with Ben Gazzara, who was obviously, they never said it, but let's just say he was part of an organized neighborhood kind of thing. But
yeah,
and just sort of the matter of fact sort of conversations that even Anthony LaPaglia had to lean over and go, listen, I'm sorry, but this is better for them. We need to focus on the neighborhood. Like, it's not about me not asking you for approval to go and be a cop. It's about taking care of the neighborhood. And I mean,
right.
even Ben Gazzara's character kind of ultimately capitulates on that fact.
Right.
And sort of seeing the navigation culturally in there between sort of, not right and wrong and like cops and not cops, and just sort of how the cultures and sort of the societal mechanisms of the cops, of the what have you, they all had to sort of commingle in this very sort of volatile time of excess. Because I mean, that's kind of what, I mean, at least for me, what a lot of the film shows. This is such a time of sort of bubbling excess. And when you add sort of the anger that was sort of permeated into the, not just the time, but obviously with the killings as well, and sort of the, the rolling blackouts and everyone sweating their ass off, it made for a powder keg.
Yeah, no, well, absolutely, well said. And just that scene that you mentioned, it's almost like another movie right there. Like, you can go into that and have a whole movie about that guy young and becoming a cop, even though he was close with a gangster growing up. There's a whole movie right there. I mean, that's what I love so much about his narratives, is that I guess people perhaps would call it like a series of vignettes. I don't know if I would label it as such. I just think that he's fearless in that sense, to not just have a beginning, middle. I mean, he has a beginning, middle, at the end, but he's so much more interested in the people and going into who they are and what their relationships are. And then in the end, it all kind of comes together as an overall, essence of what he's saying, either about and do the right thing, either about racism, or in this case about fear and paranoia, and particularly the times of the late 70s. So it's quite remarkable. How did you feel about some of those scenes Mira Sorvino and Leguizamo had together? I thought, especially after the orgy scene, I thought those two scenes where their relationship starts to break up were just phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, Mira never gets enough credit for being as good as she is. But I mean,
I agree.
I was so struck, just especially at the beginning of the movie, the way they shot certain scenes, and seeing the two of them go into the club, and then them having the scenes of them dancing by themselves,
right,
and sort of being unto themselves, and really creating this sort of these people inside the vacuum of this world, which was kind of fascinating to watch. And I mean, we get so many different back and forths, and I mean, even to dial it back to Do the Right Thing, I think of something, the scene with John Turturro and Spike Lee about, who's your favorite basketball player, who's your favorite rock star, and sort of, John Turturro explained, well, no, it's different for them,
right,
but it's not.
Yeah,
and I think that almost feels like the point of Spike Lee's work in general, be it from this or to anything. And I mean, we live in such a world, and we lived in such times where people weren't treated as people.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day is, I think, what everybody wants out of life generally.
Exactly. That is you really hit the nail on the head. Yeah, they're not people not treating each other as humans. You really see that in both of these films. I mean, they make a good double bill. I mean, even though they're about totally different things, but there's a real connection in terms of the behavior, in terms of the way people treat each other, in terms of the way they feed on fear and labels. and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, Mira Sorvino was just so great, and throughout the whole film, she was coming across as mostly very, very kind, very gentle, almost naive to an extent, lying to herself. I just thought, why is she letting Turturro get away with this? Until she doesn't, and she turns into a whole other person. I mean, she really tears him up in that car ride home. I mean, she really nails him, and then in the next scene leaves him even when and she was right. You're not going to change. Why should I believe you?
And it's his sort of self-destruction of not being at peace with his vices. Because
right.
even earlier in the film, they're trying stuff, they're being a little frisky, but it's not working. It's like, you're my wife, like, we can't do that. It's like, he tries to meet him halfway.
Yeah.
And then when eventually it gets taken all the way and it's too far, she's like, you know what? Fuck you. We're done.
and of course, he blames her for enjoying the orgy too much. It's like,
my fault. Yeah, go away,
But again, there's something funny about that. Like, that's the thing about Spike Lee, is like how does he find a way to make that? He just finds a way to this blend of humor, and it's not that he's looking for a one-liner like in a sitcom. It's just the situation. Like, there is it's black humor, it's dark humor. I mean, you can't help but laugh that he gets what he wants and then he doesn't like it because his wife's enjoying it. It's like, what? Like, talk about an insane contradiction. Did this pop out of you to you as having a good blend of humor?
Oh, absolutely. And at the beginning of the movie, we're laughing with Leguizamo's character. By the end of it, we're laughing at him, because he is the tragic character out of all this.
Totally, yeah.
And I mean, it's a film that, I mean, I think because it's the Berkowitz, and you have to have sort of the little bit of that sense of humor. And I mean, even in the film, Berkowitz is going nuts, and you have the dog come in giving him instructions. Like, that's funny.
Yeah, that was weird.
It's morbid, but it's funny.
Yeah, you're right. I was laughing, but also thinking, this is really eerie and strange. But there's certainly something funny about things that are so bizarre. And I like how the use of colors in the cinematography every time we're with Berkowitz was totally different. It was green, it was grainy, it was harsh, it was something really ugly to look at. I thought the combining those two looks gave it so much more of an edge. But every time I watch this, and I even feel that way to an extent with Do the Right Thing, there's such in a good way, because he's like I said, he's so fearless, Spike Lee, that they're just punches in the guts. You feel the heat, the summer heat, and the hate, and he is not shy. I'm not surprised people always get riled up about him, for better or for worse. As he said, he's not trying to be controversial. He's just showing how he sees the truth of his situation.
And I mean, like, from a visual standpoint, they're such different films, because Do the Right Thing was so clean and so vibrant and so large and cinematic. Like, it needed to rope us into this world in order to have sort of the tragedy hit that much better and harder. Whereas Summer of Sam, like, we're supposed to be crawling through the gutter that's filled with needles and dirt and beer and piss. Like, that's the point.
Yeah,
because that was New York at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that would have worked better with Do the Right Thing? Is that what you're saying?
No. I think they both needed their own styles. Like, you can't.
I see.
Spike had to make this movie this way because that's kind of the point, as opposed to Do the Right Thing. It needed to feel more. Because in many ways, Do the Right Thing almost feels like more of a stage play, or it could feel like a stage play.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't recreate Summer of Sam on the stage. Like, it needed to be.
Oh yeah, no, God no.
Yeah.
No, that's certainly for sure. Did you read anything about some of the controversy that went with this film being made?
I think I did at the time, but I don't remember any of it specifically.
I just from reading about it was apparently early on, because it was Michael Imperioli, and I forget, he actually wrote it with someone. I forget his
That's
name.
right, yeah.
And they brought it to Spike. And I think once Spike got involved, the victims found out, and I think it was supposed to focus more on Son of Sam, and then but the victims were really upset about it. So Spike Lee wanted to respect that, and so they made it much more about how it was affecting everyone else, which to me was much more interesting.
Yeah, me too.
So and on top of that, there's a really interesting interview that gets quite heated on Charlie Rose with Spike Lee at the time of its release. Was that the New York, I don't, it was out of the New York Times or the New York Post, who went and actually interviewed Berkowitz in jail and asked him what he thought of the film. And he criticized Spike Lee, and then he mentioned his children's names. I don't know how he found out. So Spike Lee took that as a threat. You know, why are you even asking him what he thinks of the film? Who cares what the hell Son of Sam thinks? And now, you know, he saw that as a cue to, you know, mention his kids so some maniac will go and do something. So he was quite, like, if you watch the Charlie Rose interview, he got really heated. And Charlie Rose actually said, well, maybe he was just trying to blow off some steam, and that actually set Spike Lee off. He's like, no, it was a direct threat. So pretty scary. I mean, I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of waking up to hear that David Berkowitz mentioned my wife and kids' names.
No, Lord, yeah. No, but I mean, again, it's one. But I mean, I think that also goes to sort of a bit of irresponsibility on the reporter's part as well, because
exactly, yeah,
this isn't a film that's meant to be documentarial or sort of, you know, capturing sort of a factual slice of what happened in New York at that time. It's meant to capture
exactly
sort of the emotion and the energy and the fear of it all, which I think it does quite well. But it's not meant to sort of, you know, tell the story of what actually happened.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And there are a couple of things that he was saying that was interesting, that apparently people were mad that Leguizamo was cast because they thought people were saying, well, he's Puerto Rican. Why don't you get an Italian American actor? And he brought up a good point. You know, Natalie Wood, was she Puerto Rican in West Side Story? And some other films where Puerto Ricans were portrayed by non-Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
But to him, I mean, and I agree. I mean, Leguizamo was so good at it, and he changed his voice a little bit to sound. I mean, he's from New York, right? But he sounds more like he's an Italian New Yorker,
right?
And I thought apparently his part was supposed to be even smaller, but you know, he always liked to improvise, and they incorporated his improvisations and they made it larger. Another thing was that people started to say that, you know, they undermined him by saying that he was being racist towards Italians because he was portraying the people who were beating up Adrien Brody as bigots and homophobes. He said, "Oh, that's a stare." They basically tried to say that critics were saying that you're always talking about race, but then you're doing something against Italians. And when I watched the film, I don't see that at all. I mean, they happen to be Italian American, but he's not. He's showing the flaws of all these people, and not everybody is, Italian American. Same with Do the Right Thing. He's not showing one culture as being so great and the other is not. I mean, he's showing the flaws. So I didn't think that was fair.
Human, which is the point of telling these stories to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I took that as trying to undermine him. So what is it really that you like about this movie?
I think for me that my big pull away is that it's chaoticness, like sort of the chaotic energy that it has to it. I mean, at least from my perspective, I think that put me sort of in the moment that he was trying to capture. on film, just sort of
Yeah.
the uncertainty and sort of the high energy and the borderline craziness of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what really stood out for me.
Yeah, me too. You know, a lot of his films feel that way. There is always just this real chaos. Like when you said that, I thought Clockers right away. You know, certainly, of course, the ones we're talking about today. There's always just this real angst, and he, like I said, I think it's from his fearlessness. I mean, do you see him as someone just being a real fearless director?
I think so, because I mean, I love that you mentioned Clockers too, because I think that's my personal favorite. But
That's a great one.
both
Yeah.
both films have a real sort of dirty energy to them. I mean,
Yeah.
and again, dirty is the wrong word, but it's this chaotic, it's this very street, it's this very sort of desperate energy to it. But with Summer Sam, or it felt almost like it felt like an organized mess, if that makes any sense. It
Yes.
felt very much like we were having to interpret sort of everything that was coming at us, and that felt very sort of indicative of the time. Whereas something like Clockers, where obviously there's going to be some very dark corners where people are doing crack and horrible things are going on, they're still trying to sort of have a light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas Summer of Sam was very much about, this is a very dark period that we just have to get through.
Yes.
For better or for worse, we have to just get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. No, that's absolutely right. But yeah, these are both phenomenal Spike Lee films, and I don't believe these are on any major streamers. I don't think. I know that Summer of Sam is on Hoopla. For anyone watching, if you have Hoopla, you can see it there. If you have if you have a library card, Hoopla is free. Do you know if this is on any of? Is it on Amazon or these two films?
I'm pretty sure Do the Right Thing is on Crave right now.
Okay.
For Summer of Sam, I don't know, because it is a Touchstone property, which is technically Disney. I don't know if they've added it yet to Disney Plus, but maybe eventually at some point.
Okay. That's sort of a weird, like, imagine some kid picks up the remote. It's like, hey, what's this? This is not something. It's just weird to see this on Disney.
That's why they have parental controls.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about your work as a writer. So you started in production, is that right?
Yeah, I started in well, if anything, it was VHS replication. I was the guy sort of quality controlling and sort of pulling tapes out and putting tapes in and managing a warehouse and that sort of thing. And then I moved into post-production and editing and DVD authoring and coding. And then I transitioned to sort of the other, I mean, I do other things as well, but then I transitioned to the other side of the business, and I wanted to start writing copy and sort of understanding like I knew, especially at that time, just where the business was going in terms of the importance of content out there and putting it out there, and just to see how the business has evolved from then to now has been really, really kind of fascinating, to be honest, because I mean, where we've gone from VHS tapes to now is almost night and day. It's been a fun ride, to be sure.
When you say the importance of content being put out, do you mean just that these are out on either streamers or DVDs, Blu-rays? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, see, that's a hard question, because, I mean, I'm a physical media guy. I love my Blu-rays and my DVDs.
Yeah, me too.
But there is such a demand for film and for television content that it's just going to get put out there no matter what. And I mean, I think it really speaks to sort of how the business has shifted to not just sort of understanding the need for content that you can sell, but also and have, artists and writers and directors and actors to make a living, but how it needs to be placed properly in order to rise to the top and be able to sort of have it curated properly, not just by the streamers and the programmers on one end, but from the guys like me who are writing and talking and reviewing about it. Because again, there are so many films out there and there's so many projects out there that just need their voices, need somebody to talk about it. And I mean, between you, me, and the lamppost and everyone watching, I love a good Marvel movie as much as the next guy, but does it need me to write about it? Not so much.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, I totally agree. And how was In the Seats born? What was that podcast born out of?
Well, I mean, to be fair, In the Seats was the website which we started. Just because, well, I lost my job at another place and I needed to sort of keep my foot in the door for access and freelancing and other stuff. So we started In the Seats, intheseats.ca. Feel free to come pay us a visit.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description box as well.
But also, I guess maybe last year, just in terms of seeing the way the market was shifting and how people were consuming, and just the demand for interviews and the demand for people getting to know about other people. And in setting up the podcast In the Seats With, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, whatever, YouTube, because we archive it on our channel, but just the interest in people listening to conversations and people talking about people, which I think at the end of the day is why we all like films and why we all like storytelling, because it's people wanting to know about people.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, no, I agree with, I totally agree with that. What do you think is, from your point of view, why do you think film criticism is so important?
I think it comes down to curation. I think it comes down to there needs to be some sort of a filter as opposed to sort of the Rotten Tomato, aggregate average, which so many people tend to lean on these days. There needs to be, I guess, maybe a bit of an understanding of, the consumer needs to know what their voice is, and also the consumer needs to know what their voice might be in other people, if that makes any sense, because and I'm sure you've heard this as well, but we live in a world right now where it's like, well, I've watched everything on Netflix. I've watched everything on Prime. It's like, no, you haven't. I'm telling you right now,
there's no way you have not. Yeah, there's just there's so much out there that you'd have to live a couple of lifetimes to.
And especially for film. I mean, in popular culture, I would say that the holy grail of TV has kind of been made accessible and put out there with things like, Star Trek, MASH, whatever kind of stuff you want to pull from. But for film, from a global standpoint, there is such a broad swath to pull from that we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
That's true. Yeah, I think Spike Lee even mentioned that Kurosawa in his 80s had said there's still so much about film he doesn't know. Here's a guy who was like one of the masters of filmmaking, and it's endless. There's so many cultures, there's so many ways of telling stories. There's just so much to see. So yeah, I having people who are dedicated to watching a lot and then talking about how they perceive as what is not just entertaining, but also important or relevant, and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I really agree, and as I said, I've enjoyed the In the Seats with podcasts, and yeah, you can find that on YouTube and Apple, Spotify. I'll put all the links in the description box where you could check out Dave's In the Seats podcast. And well, Dave, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your takes on these two Spike Lee films.
Well, thanks for having me, Robert. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for anyone who is their first time on this channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the subscribe button, which you can find right beside the description box below.
Somewhere around here.
Yeah. Or if you're watching the replay now, you'll see my logo, the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo floating above my head. You can also click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video or go live, like I am right now. Well, Dave, thanks again. And thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see everyone soon.